Hey, I think we're broadcasting to all our attendees. That's
We
exciting.
are now live.
We are live.
Thank
Welcome.
you all for joining and spending your Tuesday with us. We're excited to present to you the next in our series of the Deep Bench Briefings. This webinar is on the topic of AI governance in action, turning your AI policy into practice. And so we're going to spend this next hour on talking about what business owners and legal professionals can do to one, make sure you've got a real AI policy, and two, once you have that under your belt, make sure that it is a real living document. So I'm joined here by my colleague, my esteemed colleague
Oh,
Christopher Warren. Yeah, that's well, why not?
right. Why
We're
not?
having fun here. And so, Chris, maybe you should go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. My name is Chris Warren. I'm also co-chair of the AI practice group here with Moish Peltz, who's also the co-managing partner of Falcon Rappaport Berkman, as well as the co-chair of the digital assets practice group, as well as the chair of the IP litigation group. So, Moish, talking about esteemed colleagues, you certainly are one. When Moish and I were talking about this presentation, we didn't want it to be a lecture. We wanted it to be a practical, hands-on experience. And the goal here is that at the end of this, you'll leave with a working AI policy, literally. We're going to walk you through how to build it live, and give you the tools to create governance in your business, in your practice, in your for your clients, or whatever it is that you're attending this session for. Uh, the outcome is that was a really good use of an hour. And we're here for that for the reason that most AI policies fail, right? What makes this different? What makes my first AI policy different? Why are we doing this to begin with, other than it's a lot of fun? Uh, so we're going to talk about AI policies, and how to implement them, why they fail, and how to build them into the culture of your business. Who owns it? What that means? Who are the accountable parties for a policy? We're going to go through some of the most common questions we have, or how do you know which one to pick? So we'll go through that, and of course, the training and culture portion about how you implement these things in your business. And then, of course, the governance, right? What does that look like? What does it actually mean? How does it work? And then, of course, this policy is meant to be a living thing. And Moish, when he does his demo, you'll see that you're going to be updating these policies very often. In fact, if you're not updating the policies, that's a signal that you really don't have a policy, right? If it's not a living, breathing thing that's changing all the time, then your business is not really interacting with that policy. So, without further ado. Oh, that's us. Right. We should have done this first, Moish. This would have been better if we did this first.
Well, here we are.
Yeah. Well,
My name's Moish. Nice to meet
uh,
you guys. That's
uh,
Chris. I think we can
yeah,
keep going.
absolutely. Well, we should talk about the blogs. You have the block and order blog, where you're talking about digital assets, and I have the Moral Machine, which talks about AI and the intersection of that and ethics and really morals. How do we implement these things responsibly and ethically across any business?
Yeah, and there's some really good. If you want to continue this conversation from the general counsel perspective, Block and Order has on both digital assets and AI general counsel, and we talk about the biggest issues they're facing in their businesses. So it's a good place to get more as either Moral Machine or Block and Order.
Okay. So making an AI policy. Right. If you're at a business or a firm, or your bosses or your managers, they created an AI policy and they go, that was it. We're done. We did it. We checked that box. That is not that is not what this is. A policy is just the very, very beginning of the process, right? And what is that process? What is the thing that we're trying to solve for? What is the business reason? What is the problem that we need to implement an AI tool for? But we'll get into that. An outright ban, right? So whenever you have a business that says we are not using AI, period, all that means is that everyone is going to use AI, but not tell you about it, right? Your employees, your subordinates, the people that you manage are going to use it anyway, and there won't be any governance, there won't be a policy, and that's just asking for trouble. It's asking for a lawsuit. That's asking for someone to put confidential or PII or PHI into a public chatbot without really understanding what the consequences are, or using it in a way that violates state law or privacy law. So you need to create the rules and then have people understand the rules and then help them process or be part of the process of following the rules. Um, Talking about rules that are too broad or too narrow. So if you're creating something that is you can only use this tool and no other tools are permitted ever, um, you're going to run into some immediate pushback with, well, what about this? What about that? And then it's supposed to be a conversation of um, what can we do to create the process? So every time you have a new tool being used by a new group or a subgroup or a project, there has to be an owner of that. There has to be a process. There has to be a policy that governs the use of that program for that specific purpose, right? The business purpose. And then talking about policy amendments, there has to be a path to yes. So if you're looking to amend the policy and the employees or the folks on your team that you're managing are dreading that because they know the process is going to take forever and no one's going to be the amount of friction that's created by that process is enough in itself to deter the behavior. You have to lay out the path to yes. How do we want to use this thing? And not only do we want to use it, we want management to want us to use it, right? So the lesson for management has to be we want people to come to us with the ideas of what they want to do so we can do it together responsibly, right? The path to yes means the business is actually benefiting from the creative endeavors and the innovation of the folks that work there, right? The folks that pour their hearts, their passions, their lives, their livelihoods into the project or whatever the mission of the business is. So, Moish, this has you all over it. How we got here.
Yeah, that's right. So, I think, this is something that we went through subjectively because we've now gone through a couple iterations of our own internal AI policy. And this started, the back in 2023, that first week when ChatGPT came out. I was on it that first or second day and thought it was the coolest thing ever. But it evolved over time as we increasingly understood its capability, its power, not just for fun marketing stuff, but for real legal work and for real business challenges, for operational challenges, for financial challenges, and how this could be integrated into workflows to help our people be better at their jobs and do things more quickly and more efficiently. So once we understood that promise, which was probably a little over 2 years ago now, we said we're a law firm. We can't just start smashing all of this AI all around our business without being a bit circumspect and having some guardrails around who is using it and how. So once we got to that point, we understood we really needed a policy, and we started putting together that our first policy, a few years ago now. And just what it has here, right, is we had to get everyone in a room, understand how people were using it, how they wanted to use it, what the constraints were, and then start writing that down and describing that reality. So not just, how are you using it now? What would you like to do? And understanding what the frontline reality was. And so we documented that, what is now feeling like a long time ago. And as we'll get to later, it's not just about what's happening in real time. It's about updating this document over time, as Chris mentioned. And so, about 6 months ago, we looked back at our policy and said, hey, we're doing all of these things now, or we want to do some of these things. that aren't really described in that initial version of the policy. These could be things like using agents. If you don't know what an agent is, it's a instead of just having a chat bot, you ask a question. That's great. You ask another question. It's you give a long running task to the AI, and it continues to run through a multi-step process before coming back to you. It might even be a continuous process. It might even be an autonomous process, right? That has little or no human involvement. So these are things that we wanted to help describe, so that because these are increasingly being happened. Another example is things like AI transcription tools that are listening in on conversations. And so we have to adapt the policy and write around that reality as things change. And so the other part of this is really understanding the organization and building trust across the organization and training across the organization so that they feel comfortable coming to you with, hey, we have a cool idea, or we see a new tool out in the market, or we want to try something that we're not sure if it's going to work or not, and empowering people and giving them the responsibility and the freedom to try those things, but to also loop management into those things. They're not just out on their own without that coming back into the policy. So about 6 months ago, we underwent that process of, hey, we don't think our existing policy is really describing some of the new things that we want to be doing. So let's go back and revise that policy.
Yeah, I think the genesis is even more organic than that. It's, hey, I have a cool idea. Can we do this? And that's an example of a culture working, right? If your team is coming to you saying, this, can we make this thing a reality? Can we make this real? Is there a way we can do this? And the friction between what you can think of and what you can create at this point in time is basically zero. I mean, anything you can, any workflow you can think of that has an API attached to it is possible at this point. And the the sky is the limit in terms of the creativity that can be harnessed, and the efficiencies and really the quality of life we're talking about at this point can be measured by the success of that idea. Um, so let's go on to the next slide. Oh, let's do this, Moish. Let's do this. Is this
Okay,
happening?
let's do it.
Is this real? Is this
Yeah,
going to happen? All
this
right.
is real. Let's give it a shot.
All right.
Um,
I'm going to stop my share and you're going to add your share.
all right. So hopefully you can see my screen here. All right. So the URL here is myfirstaipolicy.com. And this is something that once we went through the process of revising and publishing the version 2 of our own internal AI policy, I had Claude generate a fun little website here. And if you don't like the GeoCities channel, you can change it to something more to your liking. What do you think?
I'm a
Kind of
big
like
fan
this
of the
version.
GeoCities. I think the GeoCities wins here for the nostalgia factor. Yeah, it just
Okay.
the the
Okay.
the aggressive use of teal. That's the way to go.
It's a lot of teal.
A lot of teal.
So, if you're a business organization, the idea is you can go here in several clicks, you know, you can fill this out. Uh, and generate an AI policy. So here, once you get past the name of the company and the contact individual, you can say, "Hey, we only use Copilot, and we've enabled, you know, we use Google Drive, and we use Granola. Oh yeah, and we use QuickBooks, right? So let's pull all that in, and then you have a couple other options here. Let's make sure it understands that we're subject to HIPAA obligations. And then right here, you can either download this or copy it to your clipboard. We have a very basic version of a small medium-sized business AI policy that is ready to go, right? And so it says, Peltz LLC, and so it's slightly customized. And so I think this is really good for people that are confused and don't know where to start and need something basic to get up and running. And we made this free open source for anyone to use. Now, this is, of course, a starter template. We would very strongly recommend that people discuss this with an attorney before really adopting it, because every business is different and might have specific issues that need to be addressed. But then there's another thing here, which is when we publish these policies to GitHub. And so for the more advanced user, you can go here and you can see in the same format, there's policies for small and medium-sized businesses, and there's policies for law firms. And then what you can do is there's also an AI skill here. So if you take the URL here, which is on GitHub, and you put it into Claude or ChatGPT and say, hey, can you please invoke the skill at this GitHub location? Ask me questions to help customize these policies for my organization. It'll go through a question and answer exercise to really adapt this policy for your organization. So we did this because we think, one, there's not a lot of great policies out there that are useful as a starter point. But two, our view, Chris and my view, is that this policy is only meaningful if it's really incorporated into your organization and it's incorporated into your workflows and it's incorporated alongside the advice of counsel. Because there's really complicated questions that we think everyone should think about in terms of employment decision making and which tools you're enabling and how you're dealing with vendors and how you're dealing with enforcement and compliance that aren't obvious, and no generic template can solve for your business without careful thought and consideration. And really, that process we discussed, right, of going to your team and getting their feedback and making sure the front lines and what they're doing in the business are incorporated back into the policy. And so, this is really the starting point. This is not the end point. This is how you get to version 1, but it's not version 1, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and this is actually a great place to transition to the next part of the presentation, which is okay, this was the easy part, right? You have the working draft or the working policy that you get to bring to your people, whether it's a team or the management committee or whatever it is that's the decision maker, where you're currently working, and say, here's the starting point, right? But nothing that you did just now in terms of the policy actually protects the company. And in fact, in a way, having a policy and then not following the policy or never looking at it again is almost worse than having, I don't know if that's true or not, but almost worse than having no policy at all, because you're acknowledging that we should have some type of governance, we should have some type of consequence, we should have some type of accountability, and then just doing nothing. So what is the something? What happens next? What's the next part of this that protects the business and does the governance part? Um, and that's what to do next, which is who owns this? Who's the responsible party? So in our scenario, the responsible party is Moish, right? He's the owner of the policy, right? So any tool that gets approved, any process, anyone that's using any of the tools in any step of the way, if there's ever a problem, right, it goes back to the owner of the policy, right? The outcomes and the processes that are laid out in that policy and or in the governance, right, also have an owner. So let's use a for instance that I'm a lawyer, and I have an associate that I manage, and I provide the associate with the tools pursuant to the policy that the law firm has laid out, and the owner of that policy is Mr. Peltz. And the policy says that we need to have every single case needs to be cited properly and attached to the draft of the document and and checked for context and analysis. All right. Now, the the person doing the work, the responsible person, the one that's actually using the tool, is the first step in the governance process, right? They have to have a checklist, if you would, of what do I do now? How do I use this tool? And what is the safeguard? What is the human in the loop that makes sure that we don't misuse this tool or the tool is used in a way that we didn't account for, right? So whether you're a three-person shop, a 10-person firm, a 100-person company, there's going to be a small enough group where there is going to be both the responsible person that's using the tool and the owner of that policy. And of course, this is where everyone struggles because now the policy is interacting with the real world, right? It's interacting with reality. And that's where things break. Uh, that's where accountability becomes uh, part of the culture as opposed to the finger wag, right? It's we are expecting you to use these tools. We're we're expecting that there are outcomes, and we want to make sure that those outcomes are created pursuant to a process that we've crafted specifically for whatever it is that you're doing. So if you're an accounting firm, you're a marketing firm, you're a manufacturing company, whatever you're in financial services or in healthcare, these things have their own hurdles. Um, you have to make sure that the outcome is something that you can defend, right? A defensible product that and how the conclusions of that came to be. Wow, we already did this. All right, so let's talk about something that is going to happen, right? If you're using AI and you have a process in place and you've instructed everyone and taught them what the process is, you've created the owner of that process, you've created the accountability structure, but someone made a mistake. And you made a mistake because we're human and we're going to make mistakes. So what do you do? What now? Well, you have to correct the error right away. So for us, it's easy. For lawyers, it's simple, right? We have to contact the court, the client, right? And our colleagues, whatever those in whatever order we want. We have to let everyone know, hey, we made a mistake. And the client one is sort of the one that carries across all businesses because it's front loaded. When you're engaging with the client, you let them know, hey, we're using AI to produce work product for you. And these are the processes that we put in place to make sure that the results that you're getting are grounded in human authority. That there's someone that's looking through this. And of course, there's a benefit to us using AI, and we're returning those benefits to you. But even though we've done all these processes and protections and we've put these things in place and there's governance, at some point someone might make a mistake. And we've done everything we can to minimize that opportunity. And hopefully there's a zero to de minimis number of mistakes that are made. But in the event there is one, right, we will correct it. So now the client understands and you've provided the caveat that there's a possibility. And that should be for any business, right? Here's the plan that we have in place to correct the problem if it were to happen, because there is going to be a mistake somewhere along the road. Moish, how many uh, uh, cases have been misquoted so far? I think we had a counter up the other day. We were talking about it.
Yeah, so there's a great website, Damien Charlatan keeps that's documenting all these citations. I'll drop the link in the chat so people can check it out. Um, as of now, I think there's 1,760 cases identified globally, of which over 1,000 are in the U.S.,
Right.
which is a pretty insane number considering this has only been out for a couple of years now in production for legal work. So and of course it continues to happen, if not every day, almost every day.
And this is in an industry where there's a single source of truth, right? There's a database of all the cases that have ever been published. So in businesses where that isn't true, I probably would bet that it'd be more.
Right.
Um,
Right, because
so
there's no affirmative obligation to disclose what you're doing wrong to a judicial body. It must be happening just all the time, right? Um, and so I think that's, but and then the other side of this is it's not just happening to the solo lawyer that's old and doesn't know what AI is and is using it at the last second. This is happening to large, sophisticated global firms that have the resources and technology to not do this, right? So it really gets back to about um, to having a real policy and not just having the policy be a written document, but having it be a living, breathing document that everyone on the team understands how to use the technology responsibly and has been properly trained to do that according with the policy. And there's people that are responsible for monitoring that, both within that sub team, but then organizationally to make sure that that continues to happen.
So corrected the error, whatever that error is in your specific industry. The next step is really important. Let's not do that again. How do we fix the policy or the process so that does not happen again? And that's how a policy grows. And that's why I said earlier, if you're not changing your policy is not interacting with your process, right? You're not actually, the rubber's not meeting the road. It just lives someplace in a folder and it's never looked at again. You don't have a policy. So diagnose how it failed, figure it out, right? Was it simply like a good example is we sent a, a list to somebody of I'm using a real world example, so I'm anonymizing it on the fly. We sent a list to somebody that had sources of A and sources of B, and the policy provided that sources of A would be checked, but sources of B were not checked, right? They were not to be included in the list of things to be checked. And then someone along the line said, "Hey, did we check source B?" And everyone said, "No, it would." Oh my goodness, we didn't check source B. And it was an odd thing, right? It was an odd thing to check. And I was like, boom, First Amendment to that process was we need to make sure that this is also checked, even though it's something you wouldn't think to check. Um, so you have to diagnose how it failed, and then without the heavy-handedness of a repercussion that's disastrous, right? You want people to identify in your business when there are policy failures. In fact, a bug bonus is a great way to incentivize this, where you give someone a $25 Starbucks gift card or a $100 bonus every time they find something that falls outside the policy that should be in the policy, right? Moish, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Nope, I think that's great.
All right. So we're running a little bit behind, so we're going to try to speed this up a bit. Um, so Moish, let's talk about tools and how we approve them.
Yeah. So, as we said, hopefully your tool is described in the policy, but our policy, especially the second version of the policy, was intentionally designed to be flexible. So, because what we realized is if you start out in a world where there's only one or two or three approved tools, and then you run that forward for a year, it's like, well, all of a sudden there's ChatGPT, and then there's Claude, and then there's Harvey, and then there's this, and then there's that. Or like a tool that we're using that doesn't have AI, all of a sudden has AI in it because every software product in the whole entire world now is saying, well, how do we cram AI into our product? So it's not just about, hey, we're using ChatGPT or Claude. It's every other tool we're using now has AI functionality baked in it as well. And so I think the big one here, right, is this first question, you know, is it training on your data? Are these tools preserving, confidentiality, trade secret protections in your data? You think about a law firm, you think about medical space, other regulated industries. There's either ethical constraints or legal or regulatory constraints on how your customer data, how your client data is used, how it's disclosed. And so this is a typical process of when you're looking at, SOC 2 certificates and you're looking at other security things. And so it's like, well, the biggest thing is for AI is if you're putting this data into an AI tool that's going to ingest and retain that data and use it for some other purpose that may not be under your control, that seems inconsistent with all sorts of enterprise standard data handling procedures. So that's the big one. Two is a much more, I think, enhanced version of this. It's not just this training question, but it's really mapping how your data is used, you know, throughout the organization. It's part of a larger, I think, data question, but I think it routes into this AI question. Is, you know, when you talk about just all sorts of vendors, including AI vendors, you know, are they maintaining confidentiality, security, usage rights that are consistent with your obligations and the obligations of your organization? Third is this question of ownership, you know, IP ownership. It's a copyright question. It's a trade secret question of, you are using these tools to manipulate your organizational data and then return back some analysis of that data. Who owns that work product? It should be the enterprise or your clients, depending on how that works. And then four is, you know, consistent with the responsibilities of the administrator and the responsible owners of the policy. How are they going to monitor and enforce misuse if you're not having the ability to monitor that usage in real time? And all this is also getting back to this idea of shadow AI. Is this only works if your employees are using the tools that the enterprise makes available for their use. If they just pop open their phone and start using their own individual instance of ChatGPT, the organization can't monitor that. It can't ensure that that instance is not training on uh, the customer data. It can't monitor the usage or misuse of the employee. And so it's really this holistic process of enabling tools that are fit for the purpose that your workers need, and that making sure those tools are deployed in a way that's consistent with all these obligations.
So, and to on that, the mapping, right? That's right out of NIST framework. If you're not familiar with NIST framework, it's free. You can read about it, but it's pretty much the standard of how to assess risk when using these different tools, right? So one of the biggest ones, obviously, is the data, right? Your ownership of the data, and the EU has a little bit more protection than we do in the United States, although there are plenty of states that are trying, Colorado, California, even New York in some ways, to create barriers between what data can be used for. And there is even some efforts in the United States in Congress to pass some legislation that would govern this. But we don't have one really just yet. But that doesn't mean that there aren't already uh, quite a few privacy obligations, depending on what business you're in. Not just talking about HIPAA, talking about personal information, personal identifying information, PHI. In California and New York, there's laws that if you're using AI tools in New York or for a client in New York, so if you're a Pennsylvania business and you're using an AI tool and the consequences show themselves in New York, you're subject to that law. Um, uh, so there's got to be a way to monitor that usage in a way that provides feedback to the ultimate owner, the responsible user of whatever program you're using. And from a business perspective, everyone's aware of token usage and the cost of token usage. There's actually some really great graphs that will show you the increasing cost of these tokens as the technology gets better, and it's eclipsing the cost of a full-time employee. So you're trading one type of efficiency for another, but the cost is the variable that is uncontrolled depending on the usage. So you just being able to track the usage per client, you're able to pass that through as a cost to the client for the gain of that efficiency. So for lawyers, it's an easy math problem. If it takes me 5 hours to do something without using AI, and it takes me 1 hour to do something with using AI, but the cost of that AI usage is $200, which is pretty high, but still, let's say it's $200. There's an obvious gain for the client in terms of productivity per dollar. And in other businesses, it's obviously going to be much harder because you're mushing together all the data at the same time. So, being able to monitor the tools that are approved and that the firm or company is paying for, And then, of course, pass that cost through to the clients as a benefit is something that every business should be interested in. So from a very simple way to look at this, mapping the data usage and mapping the usage of whatever tool you're using is a benefit to your client and is a benefit to your business. There's no reason not to do it. All right, we just talked about this. So, all right, let's talk about behavior or training that creates the culture, really, right? The culture around the use of AI. Ha ha. All right, Moish, this is a good segue for you to jump into the culture piece.
Yeah, so as we described, right, for us, a law firm, we have about 130 total headcount. Um, it's really about making sure that every person, we have lawyers, we have junior lawyers, we have senior attorneys, we have finance people, we have marketing people, and everyone has a different role, perhaps a different tool that they're using, different types of data and responsibilities they have. And so the policy needs to contemplate all of that, but then you need to train everyone for these tools, and then bake that into the feedback loop that we're talking about, right? And so we have three different examples here. One of a marketing agency, um, one of an architectural firm, and third of an accounting firm. And really, and you can just imagine our law firm off to the side is the fourth, is they're each going to have different goals here with how they're using AI. A marketing agency, they're doing creative campaigns, and they want to punch up their copy uh, and create stuff more efficiently, right? Perhaps brainstorm, get better ideas. So, relative to a regulated industry, it, their obligations might be they might be a bit more freed up to try new things, perhaps, right? But still within that, you need to think about really intensely about confidential client materials, because you have an unlaunched campaign. Say you're doing that for a public company and they're going to launch a new product, and you don't want the knowledge of that product to come out before that campaign launches, right? So there's a real confidentiality stakes that might go with that. And then you think, one of the topics we talked earlier was about the IP ownership, right? If you're generating marketing collateral for a new client and it's going to be owned by them, and that's part of the deliverables you're going to be giving them, you have to make sure that you're able to live up to what is likely a contractual commitment to deliver to the client ownership of the IP created pursuant to the engagement, right? So there's some, I think, really important features there that might come forward.
Yeah.
Um,
And this is largely resolved with an enterprise system, right? So we've obviously negotiated all of this in whatever we're using, be it Claude or GPT or Harvey is the system that we use. In fact, we provide something a little special. We provide a Harvey license or an account for every client of the law firm that's engaged in our litigation subscription model or our corporate subscription model. So we have an AI-based chatbot that calls to all the APIs, so it's agnostic in that respect, but it's trained on legal work. And we provide that to the clients to have attorney-client privileged communications and confidential communications with an AI bot. So they're not using their own personal accounts, which are subject to subpoenas or discovery demands, right, or retentions. So there's ways to use these tools, and I wouldn't know what that would be for a marketing firm or an architectural firm, but I'm sure there's products out there that are designed to maintain confidentiality between the client and the business or the firm. So for us, it's attorney-client privilege is the gold standard, and we maintain it by providing an actual chatbot that can function the same exact way everyone's currently using a chatbot, but it's trained and contextualized for legal services. And in most cases, when clients start uploading their data, it's using the context of their own data to help provide even narrower responses or more contextualized responses to whatever questions they're asking. Um,
Yeah, and then for the architectural firm, right? You have this concept. Now it's happening in New York City. You see that there's a building that is uh, it started crumbling, and they're redesigning and converting a building from office to residential, and so there's real stakes with architectural drawings about functionality uh, and like life safety issues, right? So there's different kinds of concerns that might go through there. An accounting firm, like a law firm, is you have financial data and social security numbers and really sensitive information that needs to be maintained. So it's really just the policy, the training, the cultural environment for each of these different types of firms will and should be different, and you should customize that for the industry and the business and the personalities within that organization.
we talked about the bug bounty.
Yeah.
But red teaming, hackathons, whatever, whatever you want to do to break it, right? You want to try to have your team in a fun way, right? In a creative way, find ways to break the things that you're making, right? Break the policy, find a way to move around it. And that's part of the fun of it, right? In a way, is making it stronger together as a team. You're you're creating not only the culture of raising your hand to say this could be tweaked a little bit, right? This could be changed because I think we could. You're creating the openness and the creativity of the people that you have on your team to make something better, make an output better, make an outcome better for not just for the business, but for the client that they're serving. So it's you want it to be something that everyone's paying attention to and checked in on as opposed to checked out on, um, because it benefits them and their relationship with their clients and ultimately themselves to be part of that process. All right. So on our monitoring and enforcement. Ooh, we already kind of touched on all this stuff, but we can go through it again.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is consistent, right, with the NIST AI framework, right? As you want to monitor, plan, document, enforce. And so, the last part here, which nobody wants to do, it's not fun. Even we did an internal training on our AI policy and governance. And, you don't,
Yesterday? That was yesterday,
yeah,
right?
it was yesterday. Yeah, who knows what day it was. But, you don't, it's not fun, but you need to have real consequences for misuse. If people don't believe that there are consequences for their actions, then they're not going to necessarily abide by the policy. So it's not just that we have a policy, but we have a real live policy that governs our actions and that people are accountable for, and they understand the responsibilities that come with the use of these tools.
And to drive that a little bit further home, um, so we in our engagement letters with our clients, I could talk about this. We, as part of us providing a Harvey uh, a Harvey subscription or license to use Harvey through our law firm, we are obviously conscious of token usage and we have budgets for token usage, which is a weird thing to say for lawyers. Lawyers, part of our negotiation is we'll give you an allotted token usage per month. But the Harvey license is real. It's a real cost. So we make sure that the clients understand that once they have this capability to have an attorney-client privileged chatbot, right, which is only possible because it's deployed by the law firm and it's owned by the law firm that maintains complete confidentiality. They can't be using it to create fruitcake recipes or to do something that's not related to the matter that they retained us for. In a real way, that breaks that privilege because it's not in furtherance of the representation. So we don't even want to have that conversation. So we put it into our engagements. You're not to use the attorney-client privilege confidential, very expensive chatbot to do anything other than what you retained us to do. Right. So that the first step of that is monitoring. Part of the engagement involves and includes the attorneys working with the clients collaboratively in an AI space to sharpen their case, to strategize about next steps, to really hone in on the issues and the weaknesses of whatever it is they're trying to accomplish from a corporate side as well as a litigation side. So we don't want that space being cluttered with things that are not relevant to that representation. But without oversight, without any type of, and surveillance is a harsh word, but it's not surveillance. It's we want to know what it's being used for. And the only way to do that is to look. So first step is monitoring, right? And we do that with our own teams because that's the best way without creating additional administrative work to actually view and monitor what the inputs and outputs are of AI usage. And then, of course, the planning. Bad days are going to happen, right? What is the plan that happens automatically when something goes wrong, right? Who do we notify? There's the plan. It tells you what to do, right? And everyone is trained on that before they get the tools, before before they can actually do the thing, they need to understand the thing and be trained on the thing. And then, of course, documentation too is the inputs and outputs are very important because that helps you diagnose where the if there is something that happened that's not proper or that is that has a false has context leakage or it's a context drift or something happened. We want to be able to trace it and find out how it happened so we don't do that again. Um, so this goes back to uh, if there's a policy, but no one's paying attention to it and no one believes that it's being enforced, then nobody's really going to comply with it and the culture breaks, right? It's like no one's there, everyone's asleep at the wheel. We can do whatever we want, kind of thing happens. And that's not good for anybody. Okay. So this was we've touched on this earlier about the human element, right? There's a lot of conversation around we're taking the humanity out of the service element of what we do in our daily endeavor. But I think saying it on the front end is what keeps it human, right? We do our best to minimize risk and mistakes, but they're going to happen. And hopefully it doesn't happen to you. That's a nightmare, but it might, right? And we're honest about that up front. In the same way it was before the AI revolution, which this is, right? This is a change in the definition of what work is, and will continue to evolve. At least I believe that's the case. All right, so we're actually on time, Moish. We have 10 minutes left, and we're on the last 10 minutes. I don't know how we did
Look at
that.
that. It's amazing.
I don't know how we did that. So do we have any comments or questions in the chat?
Yeah, this is a good time if anyone has any questions to drop them in the chat, and we will be happy to address them in real time as we wind down and conclude the presentation. Segment 6 is about what's next, right? It's about keeping it current. I mean, this is the process we just underwent and kind of leading into why we're doing this presentation. Is updating the policy, making sure it's a live document, making sure your team is trained and understanding of what's happening, making sure that you're monitoring everything that's going on both internally and with the policy and out in the world as this technology continues to improve dramatically, basically week over week at this point, is all part of this process. So, something, we have here is right, setting a cadence is having this be not just a one time, here's the policy, we'll see what happens, we'll get back to it when we feel like it, a recurring review when there's new tools, new incidents, new laws, new regulatory provisions, when you enter a new market or a new industry, you're being critical about the policy and where it's at and what it needs to do to adjust. Watching the law, I mean, this is something where there's a lot going on at the state level, potentially at the federal level, and definitely at the international level. Other states' laws will reach you, right? Whether if you're doing business, in the United States, there's California, there's New York. New York just signed into law today a ban on AI data centers. So like pretty much every day, there's some state law happening, and uh, there's going to be a lot of legal challenges to these laws as well. So that's going to have to monitor the courts as well. If you're doing work internationally, it even ramps up. And there's a lot of adjacent areas like privacy and consumer protection that impact um, AI and AI policies.
So,
Um,
sorry,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no, by all means.
Now, I was just going to get to the template, right? We have one
Okay.
more thing here that I wanted to cover, which is
Yep.
one of the goals of us. If you go back a slide, is publishing our template is to invite this process to happen in the open, right? If people think that our template sucks or doesn't work for them, uh, that's cool. We want to hear it. We want them to say, "Hey, you should add this or change that or do this," and we would invite that feedback. We're going to continue to update our template. If you know how to use GitHub, you can fork it or you can suggest improvements using GitHub. If you don't know how to use GitHub, trust me, your agent knows how to, so you can ask it to do it for you, or you can just send us an email. And we would love for people to contribute to our work product so that it becomes better and becomes a better communal resource for other businesses out there. There's actually a typo on the slide. It's not myaipolicy.com. It's myfirstaipolicy.com, although maybe we should register that one too if it's not already registered.
Quick, quick.
Yeah. That's right. Uh, and yeah,
So the action plan, right? We made a promise at the beginning of this that at the end of it, you would have the tools you need to create both the policy, which you're able to do now, as well as governance, real governance. So what is that action plan? Well, sit down with your people. If you have, it starts with people, right? Everything starts with people. Everything you do in life happens through people. Not to get philosophical, but your goal is to improve your business and improve your service of other businesses. So if you're a business of 10 people, everyone get together in a room, right? What is the problem you're trying to solve? What are people actually using on the front lines? What do people want to use that aren't using? And if there is something, demo it. And within 30 days, not 3 months, not a year, not a year and a half. This has happened. There's 0% chance that your people are not using it now in some way, shape, or form. So quickly, in the next 30 days, right, produce a list of different software or different things or different workflows or different wants and put them together and say, this is what we're going to base our policy on, right? Tailor it exactly to that. Then you got to operationalize it. So someone needs to be the owner of that policy and responsible. It's a big job. Someone's got to do it. You got to be responsible enough to make sure that you're available to train, to hold accountable, to monitor. And you're right, it is administrative work, but you're providing the guardrails and the guidance to your team on how to use these different processes, right? So gate AI behind training, make sure that you have buy-in from your people about how they're going to use these things. And they should have buy-in because they're the ones that are telling you how they're going to use it, right? And then you have to break it, prove it, right? You have to try to break it, break the policy, run an incident plan. What happens if this happens? The bad day, right? What happens on that bad day? And make sure that your policy is amended to reflect what was broken, because something will be broken, right? Move fast, break things, but you got to fix them. And then this process continues to happen, right? It's not just you're done, right? You're not finished. At the end of that, there's there has to be an iterative process um, to make this as good as it possibly can be right now. But then in 6 months from now, it's most certainly would have changed if you're actually implementing and using it and it's meeting reality. It's meeting you and your employees and your team what you're actually doing as opposed to not. Oh wow, we're at the very end. Fork the policy. That was supposed to be funny, but yeah.
I see one question here, which is on, when you have um, AI prompts, and where do the responses and the prompts get stored? And I'll say that that really depends on the AI system being used. One of the things that you might hear about is zero data retention, and certain providers like Anthropic, like ChatGPT, enable zero data retention so that the data, the prompting, and the responses to the prompting, if there's storage of that, it is not on the AI provider's side. It is only internal to the enterprise, and so that's why you hear a lot about zero data retention, because it enables you to set those customizations and then have the data that either goes out or comes back only being stored on enterprise systems and not on vendor systems. So that's something to think about, is not just which tools you're using, but how you configure the data retention policies within those tools, and then how that monitoring, for example, you might have monitoring inside the vendor tool, or you might have the vendor tool have that API export that data in real time and then delete that. So there's zero data retention of what's happening, but you're exporting the data in real time to your enterprise, and then you're maintaining that data within the enterprise and not on a vendor system.
To
So
and to bring it back to those prompts, right? So the inputs, in our firm we share them. So we have in Harvey, there's a prompt library and there's different workflows that people literally create. They're like, hey, this really worked well. Let me propose this workflow. You propose the workflow. The people that volunteer to test these things go, this is a great workflow, and then it gets published to the whole firm like in a day, right? Same thing with Claude. Claude is now doing collaborative work. There's the prompts, the inputs, garbage in, garbage out still applies, right? So the prompts are your first step in communicating with your AI tool. And AI is also really great at creating prompts. It knows how to talk to itself. So utilize that. Say, hey, and by the way, you can have a conversation with it. You can say, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. Before you create the prompt to accomplish this task, I want to have at least 10 questions asked by you on how I can accomplish this, or ask for specificity. I want to really nail this down and get this prompt just right. And then, of course, AI will comply and say, okay, I'm going to ask you 10 questions that I think would help me create this prompt, and you get to direct it. And then at the end of the day, you're going to have a nice prompt to do the thing you want to do. And go crazy with it. I want to search these 10 websites every day for the things that I'm interested in, and I would like you to create an aggregate of those things and email it to me. Okay, let's do that. So whatever it is that you want to create, you can create, and you can absolutely use AI to help you do that. Of course, we're available. Our emails are uh, on the invite, but you can feel free to reach us at myfirstaipolicy.com. You can check us out on GitHub for the AI policy itself. Send us your red lines. We mean it. Seriously, send us your red lines. We'd love to take a look and talk about it and help you and help everyone else raise the floor on what is AI governance and AI policy. We want as many people as possible operating from a level of knowledge and intent and intelligence as possible, right? Because this is the future, and how we get there together really determines what that looks like. So we're in this for the future of humanity, to save the world, and of course create a better work product for our clients. So thanks again for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and hope it was an hour well spent.
Yep. Thank you all for joining us and appreciate your time spent with us. Have a great day.